The trailer for Sistas Season 9, Episode 5 confirms what fans feared most. Karen is not ready to move forward, not ready to let anyone near her pain, and not ready to accept comfort from the very people who love her most. Her silence is deafening, and her refusal to heal has begun to fracture the sisterhood in ways we never thought possible. The last episode ended in a storm of emotions, with Zach struggling to carry his grief, Aaron attempting to build a fragile future, and Karen isolating herself completely. Episode 5 promises to push this wedge even deeper. The official tease shows us that Karen's grief has transformed into anger, and that anger has no direction. It lashes out at anyone who dares to step into her world. Fans expect her to withdraw even further, cutting herself off from family dinners, hiding in the nursery, and refusing to touch the living child she still has. That haunting image is not just a storyline, it is the soul of this season. It reveals how grief can hollow out love, how silence can cut deeper than words, and how one woman's brokenness can shatter an entire circle of friends. But Karen is not the only one spinning in chaos. Sabrina's storyline takes a darker turn as betrayal resurfaces. Her history with Rich has left scars that refuse to heal, and now, in Episode 5, she may face him head-on. Fans whisper about a brutal confrontation, one where Sabrina finally speaks without fear, calling him out publicly and refusing to ever let him back into her life. This moment could mark her transformation, not as the broken friend seeking comfort, but as the woman who decides her healing comes before anyone else's expectations. Still, that kind of strength doesn't come without a cost. Her friendship with Danny may suffer. As rumors suggest, Sabrina could lash out at the very person who once carried her through the darkest nights. Episode 5 sets up a cruel irony. In finding her voice, Sabrina may silence the bonds that once held her up. The sisterhood is tested not only by Karen's grief, but by Sabrina's rage and her refusal to let betrayal be forgotten. Meanwhile, Fatima carries a secret heavy enough to crush her. She's pregnant, yet hiding that truth, pretending she can juggle her own pain while supporting everyone else. The burden is unbearable. She has stood strong for too long, but Episode 5 suggests the cracks are widening. Fans anticipate an emotional eruption, Fatima breaking down, snapping at Zach, maybe even losing control in front of the others. This breakdown would not just be about pregnancy or pressure, but about the suffocating weight of being the one expected to hold everyone together. The medical injustice that shook Episode 3 lingers here as well, with Dr. Cruz's cold dismissal threatening to resurface. Sabrina, still burning with rage, could bring that fight into the public eye, demanding justice and exposing a painful truth about how Black women's health is treated. If this thread ignites in Episode 5, it won't just be about personal grief anymore. It could spark something larger, a ripple of activism that forces every character to take a stand. Fatima's hidden pregnancy and the looming confrontation with injustice create a collision of life and death, renewal and despair, hope and heartbreak. And while all of this chaos unfolds, Andi is standing on her own cliff, threatened by Hudson, torn between her feelings for Robin, and burdened with a legal case that grows more dangerous with every passing moment. Andi is the one whose storyline may explode in Episode 5. Fans speculate that Hudson could finally face justice, ending up behind bars, but nothing is certain in this world. Andi's struggle is not just romantic anymore, it's survival. She is fighting to hold her professional life together while personal stakes keep dragging her down. Episode 5 teases more danger, more secrets, and more decisions that could determine not only her fate, but also the fate of those around her. She stands as both the strength of the group and the potential weak link if her world comes crashing down. What makes Episode 5 so powerful is not just what happens to each woman individually, but how their struggles collide. Karen refuses comfort, Sabrina lashes out, Fatima hides her truth, and Andi risks everything in her fight. These storylines are not separate. They are colliding like storms, each one feeding into the other until the bond of sisterhood is stretched so thin it may finally snap. The question for fans is not simply who survives Episode 5, but what remains of the relationships after the storm passes. Will grief divide them forever? Will secrets destroy what little trust they have left? Or will the pain finally strip everything down to the core, forcing them to either rise together or fall apart completely? One thing is certain, Episode 5 is not about healing, it is about breaking. And once broken, nothing will ever be the same again. Episode 5 begins where the pain of the last chapter left off, but this time the fractures are too deep to ignore. Karen's grief no longer sits quietly in the corner of her world. It spreads into the lives of everyone who dares to come close. She has made her room a prison, turning away Zach, turning away Aaron, and leaving her surviving child in a space filled with both love and fear. She is terrified of holding on too tightly, as if loving what's left might invite fate to take it all away again. Fans fear that this refusal to connect will not only isolate her, but also break Zach in ways we haven't seen before. He is mourning the loss of his child while being pushed aside as Karen clings to her silence. Aaron, on the other hand, is left in limbo, wanting to build a future, but facing a woman who cannot even bear to look at him without remembering the child she lost. This triangle of pain is set to erupt in episode 5, not with shouting matches or dramatic declarations, but with the sharp quiet of people who have nothing left to say to each other. That silence, that emptiness, is more brutal than any fight. And then comes Sabrina, a character who has always carried both strength and vulnerability in equal measure. She has tried to lean on her friends, tried to bury her betrayal by Rich under layers of survival, but episode 5 teases that the mask finally slips. Sabrina is done playing victim. Her confrontation with Rich is expected to be fiery, unapologetic, and public. She will not only refuse his return, but make it clear that betrayal has no place in her life ever again. But while this fight empowers her, it may also cost her. Danny has always been Sabrina's lifeline, her comfort when the walls closed in, but now the bond is tested. Episode 5 hints that in the heat of her anger, Sabrina may lash out at Danny too, confusing friendship with betrayal, pushing away the one person who has stood by her all along. The tragedy here is cruel. In fighting for herself, Sabrina risks destroying the very bond that gave her strength. It's a painful reflection of how grief and rage twist even the strongest friendships into fragile glass. One wrong word, one wrong reaction, and everything shatters. Fatima, meanwhile, is walking her own dangerous path. Carrying the secret of her pregnancy, she wears strength like armor, refusing to let anyone see how heavy her burden has become. But episode 5 is where that armor begins to crack. She has been the rock, the supporter, the one expected to absorb everyone else's pain while hiding her own. Fans expect that this pressure will finally erupt. Maybe it's a sharp word to Zach, maybe it's a full collapse behind closed doors, but one thing is certain, Fatima cannot hold this secret forever. The longer she hides it, the greater the explosion when the truth finally breaks free. And her secret is not just personal, it's a direct contrast to Karen's grief. One woman has lost a child, the other carries life within her. Episode 5 sets up the cruel parallel that could either tear them apart or bind them together in unexpected ways. But knowing the trajectory of this season, it leans toward division before unity. Fatima's secret may feel like a betrayal to those who believe she should have spoken sooner, and that tension could burn through the sisterhood like wildfire. At the same time, the ghost of medical injustice still lingers. Dr. Cruz's dismissive treatment in episode 3 is not forgotten, and in episode 5, that wound may be ripped open again. Sabrina, emboldened by her confrontation with Rich, could turn her fury toward the system itself, calling out Cruz, demanding justice, and shining a light on the deeper truth that Black women's health has too often been neglected. This subplot, while smaller in the grand scheme of personal drama, has the potential to explode into something bigger. Something that forces all the women to step into a fight beyond their own private pain. But will they? Or will the fractures between them keep them from uniting at the very moment when unity matters most? That is the haunting question episode 5 teases, but does not yet answer. And then, standing in the shadows of all this turmoil, is Andi. She is fighting her own war, one that has nothing to do with babies or betrayal, but everything to do with survival. Hudson still lurks in her storyline, his threats hanging like a blade above her. Robin remains an unresolved chapter of her heart, pulling her between what she wants and what she fears she cannot hold. And the legal case she carries grows more dangerous by the day. Fans expect episode 5 to push Andi deeper into the fire, forcing her to make choices that risk both her professional career and her personal safety. What makes Andi's journey chilling is that she has to fight her battles alone. While the others are consumed by grief, betrayal, and secrets, Andi's war is silent but deadly. She cannot lean on the Sisterhood when the Sisterhood itself is crumbling. She cannot confess her fear when everyone else is drowning in their own. Episode 5 positions her as both the most independent and the most endangered of them all. What ties this entire episode together is the haunting theme of isolation. Karen isolates in her grief. Sabrina isolates in her rage. Fatima isolates in her secret. Andi isolates in her battle. Even Zach and Aaron, who should be leaning on each other, are instead drifting into their own private corners of loss and conflict. The sisterhood that once seemed unbreakable now feels like it's hanging by a thread, each woman lost in her own world, each woman refusing to open the door for the others. And the cruel reality is that isolation breeds more pain. Episode 5 is not about finding comfort, it's about refusing it. Not about leaning on each other, it's about pushing each other away. And once those walls go up, the question becomes whether anyone will ever break them down again. Fans brace for impact, knowing that this episode could mark the point of no return, the moment where the bonds that held the women together finally snap under the weight of grief, betrayal, and secrets too heavy to carry. Episode 5 will not simply replay the pain we have already seen, it will sharpen it into something unbearable. Karen's silence has now transformed into a weapon, and every person close to her feels the cut. Zach, who has been fighting to hold himself together, begins to unravel. He is caught between grief for the child he lost and the suffocating guilt of not being able to pull Karen back into the light. Fans whisper that Zach's breaking point could arrive here, not in an explosive outburst, but in the quiet defeat of a man who has given everything and still lost too much. His distance grows, his words shrink, and the space between him and Karen becomes a canyon no bridge can reach. Aaron, meanwhile, continues to circle Karen with hope, with promises of a future, but every attempt is met with the cold wall of a woman who has shut the world out. His persistence may turn into desperation, and desperation in this kind of fragile moment often sparks conflict instead of comfort. The love triangle, which once promised drama of choice and desire, has now devolved into something darker. 3 people bound not by love, but by grief, loss, and the inability to move forward. Episode 5 ensures that the fracture becomes permanent. There is no easy reconciliation here, only wounds too deep to heal. But as Karen closes her doors, Sabrina throws hers open in the most violent way possible. Betrayal has been eating at her for too long, and now she is ready to let it out. Episode 5 hints that Sabrina will not simply confront Rich in private, but will turn it into a spectacle, a confrontation too loud to ignore. She will call him out, humiliate him, and make sure that the world sees her not as a woman broken by betrayal, but as one who refuses to be controlled by it anymore. Yet this empowerment comes with shadows. The sisterhood has always been her safety net, but in her fiery independence, she may destroy the very net she needs. Fans expect that in her rage, Sabrina might cross lines with Danny, accusing her, snapping at her, or pushing her away in a way that cannot be taken back. What was once a bond of survival now risks becoming another casualty of grief and anger. Episode 5 does not soften this blow. It sharpens it, making it clear that even friendships built in fire can still burn down. And then there is Fatima, balancing life within her even as the world outside seems to collapse. The pressure on her is brutal, keeping her pregnancy secret while absorbing everyone else's suffering. But every secret has an expiration date, and Episode 5 pushes Fatima closer to that breaking point. Fans speculate that she may reveal her pregnancy not as a joyous confession, but as an anguished outburst. Perhaps in the middle of a fight, perhaps at the very moment when the group is already stretched to its limit. The cruel symmetry cannot be ignored. Karen grieving a child lost, Fatima carrying a child in silence. These two realities cannot coexist without pain. Episode 5 will show us whether this revelation tears the sisterhood apart or forces it into confrontation. Either way, it will not be peaceful. Fatima's strength is legendary, but even legends crack when the burden is too heavy. Her collapse could be the spark that ignites the next storm. Andi's storyline, while separate, is no less suffocating. She has tried to carry her battles alone, but Episode 5 makes it clear that the threats circling her are closing in. Hudson's shadow is longer than ever, his presence more dangerous, and Robin remains the unresolved storm in her heart. Andi is forced into choices where every option leads to loss. her career, her safety, her love. Fans whisper that Hudson may finally be cornered, maybe even facing the justice he deserves, but Andi knows that victory in one battle may open wounds in another. Her case deepens, the risks multiply, and her isolation grows. She is fighting wars on multiple fronts, and every step she takes feels like walking deeper into fire. What makes Andi's struggle so devastating is that no one else can fight it for her. While the others drown in grief and betrayal, Andi fights in silence, knowing that if she falls alone. Episode 5 positions her not just as a friend on the sidelines, but as a central figure whose survival determines much more than her own fate. The real terror of this episode lies in how every storyline feeds the same theme: disconnection. Karen cannot connect with love, Sabrina cannot connect with trust, Fatima cannot connect with honesty, and Andi cannot connect with safety. Each woman is trapped in her own cage, and each cage is locked tighter as the minutes pass. Fans have long celebrated the sisterhood as unbreakable, a bond that could weather betrayal, heartbreak, and even death. But episode 5 asks the most brutal question: what if the sisterhood itself is the thing that breaks? What if grief, instead of pulling them together, finally pulls them apart for good? The thought is unbearable, and yet every frame of this trailer suggests that the unthinkable is becoming inevitable. By the time episode 5 closes, nothing will feel the same. Karen's grief will stand as a wall too high to climb. Sabrina's fury will scorch the very bonds she needs most. Fatima's secret will twist hope into conflict. Andi's fight will drag her into darker places than ever before. And the men, Zach, Aaron, Rich, will circle these women like ghosts, either pushing them closer to collapse or vanishing when they are needed most. Episode 5 is not about resolution, it is about destruction. The question for fans is not who wins, but who survives. And even survival feels uncertain when every bond is breaking, every secret is revealed, and every heart is either hardened or shattered. By the time the tension of episode 5 reaches its height, the fractures are no longer hidden. They are open wounds, bleeding into every corner of the sisterhood. Karen's silence, which began as grief, now turns into a dangerous form of withdrawal that threatens to erase her from the lives of those who love her most. She does not just avoid comfort, she actively refuses it, pushing away Aaron's gentle attempts, shutting down Zach's fragile efforts, and even closing her heart to Fatima's compassion. Each rejection slices deeper into the group, creating fault lines that cannot be ignored. Zach's grief takes on a harsher shape here, not loud or violent, but hauntingly hollow. He begins to drift further, no longer fighting for space in Karen's life, no longer trying to break through her wall. This kind of surrender is far scarier than rage. It is the surrender of a man who has nothing left to give. Aaron, in contrast, clings to hope, convinced that persistence can heal wounds. But episode 5 makes it clear that his hope may backfire. Sometimes love offered too fiercely feels like pressure, and Karen, drowning in sorrow, may see his devotion as another chain instead of a lifeline. That cruel irony sets the stage for an emotional implosion where no one comes out unscathed. Sabrina's rage, meanwhile, burns hotter than ever. Episode 5 reveals her stepping into a role fans have long waited for. A woman no longer afraid to call out betrayal and claim her voice. Her confrontation with Rich is brutal and public, stripping away any chance of reconciliation. She does not whisper her pain. She shouts it, forces him to face the weight of what he has done. But that fire, once lit, cannot be contained. She risks turning it against the people she still needs, the people who stood by her when she could not stand on her own. Dani, in particular, may find herself scorched by Sabrina's fury, caught in the crossfire between empowerment and alienation. The heartbreak is that Sabrina believes she is rising, when in truth she may be burning her bridges. Episode 5 sharpens this paradox. Strength can be destructive when it isolates, healing can turn cruel when it demands total independence, and survival can cost the very relationships it was meant to protect. Fans brace themselves for the fallout, knowing that Sabrina's choices will echo long after the confrontation ends. Fatima's secret begins to tremble on the edge of revelation. She has hidden her pregnancy as though silence could protect her, but silence is heavy, and episode 5 shows that she cannot carry it much longer. The weight of supporting everyone else while guarding her own truth begins to break her. She has been strong for too long, and the cracks are visible. Fans expect her secret to spill not as a confession but as an eruption, a moment where she can no longer keep the mask on, where anger and exhaustion pull the truth from her lips. What makes this revelation devastating is not only the fact that it collides with Karen's grief, but also the timing. To reveal life in the midst of loss is to force a comparison no one wants to face. Karen may see Fatima's pregnancy not as hope, but as betrayal, and that contrast could rip them apart. Yet fans also whisper that this storyline may carry a deeper symbolic weight, the reminder that life and death are always intertwined, that even in the darkest moments, the possibility of new beginnings cannot be erased. Whether it heals or destroys depends entirely on how the circle reacts, and episode 5 promises to keep us guessing until the final moment. And then comes Andi, still fighting her battles in silence. While the others drown in grief, secrets, and betrayal, Andi is locked in a struggle that threatens both her career and her life. Hudson's shadow looms larger than ever, and Robin remains a storm she cannot calm. The legal case she carries begins to spiral, each step drawing her further into danger, each choice tightening the noose around her neck. Fans speculate that episode 5 may finally corner her, forcing a confrontation she cannot escape. But what makes Andi's journey so haunting is her isolation. The Sisterhood is collapsing around her, each friend lost in their own pain, leaving Andi to carry her burden alone. She is strong, she is clever, but she is human. And episode 5 makes it clear that her strength may not be enough this time. This is the cruel balance of the show. While the Sisterhood once meant no one had to fight alone, now each woman is being forced into solitary battles, cut off by walls of grief, anger, and silence. Andi's fight is no exception, and it may be the one that costs her everything. Episode 5, at its core, is a study of disconnection. Each character spirals in their own direction, each storyline pulling the circle further apart. Karen shuts down in grief. Zach retreats into hollow silence. Aaron clings with desperate hope. Sabrina burns bridges in the name of strength. Danny absorbs the fallout of anger not meant for her. Fatima hides a truth that grows heavier by the day. Andi walks alone into battles too dangerous to face. Together, these fractures form a haunting portrait of sisterhood under siege. The question is not whether they still care for one another. They do, but whether care is enough when pain has carved such deep divides. Fans fear that this episode may mark the end of the circle as we know it. Not because love is gone, but because grief has built walls too high to climb. And just beneath the surface lies the most terrifying possibility. What if this breaking is permanent? What if the grief Karen cannot face, the betrayal Sabrina cannot forgive, the secret Fatima cannot hold, and the danger Andi cannot escape do not lead to reconciliation, but to the final unraveling? Episode 5 teases this with every beat of its trailer, every whispered line, every silent stare. It is not promising healing, it is warning us of collapse. And collapse, once it begins, does not stop until everything is in ruins. That is the fear fans carry into episode 5. That when the dust settles, the sisterhood we have known for 9 seasons may be gone forever, leaving only fragments of love where once there was an unbreakable bond.